Hi, thank you for clicking on this video. My name is Furk, aka Phil, and since at the time of this recording, Olympus has released a new camera, the OM3, which I was kind of surprised because based on the design, the camera looks quite retro style based on the design of the OM1. And since I'm a fan of vintage style cameras, I thought I would just share my thoughts of which retro design camera you should get in 2025. And as a regular viewer, you know that I'm a huge fan of the Nikon ZF. And specifically in this video, I will talk about the Nikon ZF, the Fujifilm X-T5, which I don't own, but this X-T1 will represent that. And as mentioned, the newly released OM3 from Olympus, which will represent this OM1. And I will just give you some of my thoughts about that new release also. As a regular viewer, you know that I'm a huge fan of the Nikon ZF. I bought this camera with my own money and own this camera now over 1 year. And I also use it a lot to film these kinds of videos on YouTube. Right now, a different camera is recording me to just showcase you the camera right now. And straightforward, this is also the camera I would recommend for most people if you are looking for a retro design camera, unless you are prioritizing two specific things very much, and that would be ergonomics and size and weight, plus the discussion about aperture rings, but I will get to that later. You see here that the Nikon ZF has the retro design dials of ISO and shutter speed. And unfortunately right now, at the time of this recording, we still don't have any lenses regarding aperture rings. I raved a lot about this topic on my channel, so you can see on my past videos. But overall, this camera just punches above all its class. First of all, you have a full frame sensor in this camera. 24 megapixels, which is plenty enough, at least for my use cases. The image quality of this camera is just beautiful and amazing. The Nikon color science is something I have learned to love since I own this camera. And overall, this camera just feels amazing. The build quality is there. On top you have brass dials, which you can also hear. The clicks are just satisfying. And this camera has a lot of tech in it. A highly controversially discussed topic is this flip out screen. I personally don't mind it because when I use this camera, I kind of treat it like a film camera by just flipping it, by just closing the screen. So I don't see anything and just use the viewfinder. But also if I shoot my kids, in portrait mode, I just like to use this kind of angle to shoot from below. I know that a lot of people prefer the tilt up screen, which I can also understand, but in the end it's a matter of preference, I guess. Also, this camera has a lot of tech in it regarding video capabilities. If you're watching this video, I assume that you already watched a lot of Nikon ZF viewers before, so you might know that already. For example, this camera has image stabilization, which works very well for video recording, but also works very good for long exposure for photography. And now after 1 year after its release, in my opinion, this camera just holds a lot of value. Because the prices you get right now on the used market, in Germany it's around 1,700 euros. You can get a Nikon ZF in very good condition. And I know that depends on your region, but that kind of price is just, in my opinion, great value for a full frame retro design camera. And there are, as I mentioned, there are only two reasons why I wouldn't recommend this camera to you. And the first one is the ergonomics. The ergonomics is not great on this camera, especially this is relatively big. and bulky regarding the camera housing. You have this kind of, yeah, you could call it a grip, but it's not feeling great if you hold it only like that. And your hand gets relatively quickly tired, especially when you have bigger lenses on this camera. And Nikon has cooperated with Smorik to have this kind of grip, which I also own since launch, and it does improve the ergonomics a bit, but still compared to other cameras, it still doesn't feel that great, to be honest. So that's definitely one of the main cons regarding the Nikon ZF. If you want to consider this camera, I would recommend to go into a local camera store and hold it yourself and see if you can deal with the ergonomics of the Nikon ZF. Also, in context of the ergonomics is the weight of this camera. This is relatively heavy for a modern mirrorless camera, especially when you compare it with the Fujifilm APC camera, which is also retro designed. I'm not gonna lie, all the Fujifilm cameras just feel better regarding ergonomics, but also regarding the weight because of the APC technology and smaller lenses. So if that's something you value, you should keep that in mind. Talking about lenses, the lens choices in the Nikon ecosystem is excellent regarding the specs and the technology, but most of the lenses are not designed or not in the purpose of the retro design language of the Nikon ZF. Right now you only have this 40mm f2 and a 28mm 2.8, which is kind of designed with a retro design language, but as you see, it's fully plastic. You have no metal mount. The optics is great on this camera, don't get me wrong, but yeah, currently after 1 year of the Nikon ZF, we still don't have any native lenses specifically for the Nikon ZF. That being said, there's a lot of third-party options. Vogtländer, for example, who dedicated their lenses purely for the retro design stuff, also have Z-mount lenses, which works perfectly on the Nikon ZF. They are fully manual focus, but that's, I guess, accomplished the retro design of the Nikon ZF. So they are still options if you want to look regarding specific lenses. But that's something you have to keep in mind if you are looking at the Nikon ZF. If these 2 points regarding ergonomics, weight, plus lens choices with aperture rings are deal breakers for you, you should, I guess, look at the Fujifilm X-T5 right now. As I mentioned, I don't own that camera, I only have this X-T1. They are similar designed regarding size and weight. And also the X-T line just feature that retro design language with all the dials you have, the ISO dial, the shutter speed, exposure compensation, and as I already mentioned, Fujifilm has on their lenses the aperture ring, which I personally prefer more compared to the Nikon ZF, because then you have all your exposure dials within this triangle and control it accordingly. And already, if you put them next to each other, you see that the X-T cameras are much smaller compared to the Nikon ZF. Also much lighter, plus what Fujifilm solved much better compared to others, in my opinion. They still managed to keep the ergonomics with the retro design by including a good grip, which still fits the design. And on the back you also have that kind of thumb rest, which you don't have here on the ZF. It's just some piece of rubber, but it's not nice to hold compared to the X-T line. Of course, this camera is, because of the size, the weight is also much lower, and therefore ergonomics it's much better to use this camera, in my opinion at least. The downside, which in my opinion is not really a downside, it depends on your personal opinion, is that you have an APC sensor, which has the plus that because of the smaller sensor, you only have to carry smaller lenses, and this also contributes to the smaller bodies. Regarding the flip screen, I think the X-T5 has it similar to this X-T1. It's a flip up screen, which can be a plus if you are preferring to shoot from the hip, because the screen is then in line of your subject. And I also think the X-T5 you are able to tilt it for portrait on this way. So if you prefer that kind of screen, the X-T5 has it. To be honest, I don't have any cons regarding the X-T5 or in general the X-T line of Fujifilm. It's highly depending on what you are shooting. The only con which comes in mind is regarding the autofocus system of in general Fujifilm cameras, especially if you look at last year's discussion, where Fujifilm basically destroyed their autofocus with the firmware update, which also impacted the X-T5. And then it took about, I think, 8 months or so to get that firmware restored again by Fujifilm. And now it's kind of works again like previously, but that autofocus system is still no match compared to the Nikon ZF. In my opinion, the Nikon ZF or Nikon cameras nowadays just blow out Fujifilm cameras. I had the Fujifilm X100VI last year, and in comparison with the ZF, the autofocus was, in my experience shooting my kids, much worse compared to the ZF. But not everybody needs high-class autofocus, so if that's something you can look over, the X-T5 might be your choice of retro design camera. Regarding price is something that I personally would also lean more towards the Nikon ZF, because the Fujifilm X-T5 is currently running around 1,600 euros on MPB, and again that's highly depending on your region. I personally would pay a couple of dollars more to get a full frame camera with a much better autofocus system. Again, that's highly depending on what you're shooting, because in my scenario I mainly document my family, and with 2 small running kids, also mainly shooting indoors, I just appreciate a better autofocus system plus the low light ability of a full frame sensor. But in my opinion, you can't do anything wrong choosing one of each. As I said, it highly depends on your shooting cases. Just a small comment also regarding film simulations. Of course, all Fujifilm cameras, and that's also what made Fujifilm popular, have all these kinds of film simulations, plus the options to load all the custom recipes from the internet onto your camera to have all kinds of film simulations. That ability is not that available on the Nikon system. And if you are mainly a JPEG shooter, you might lean into the Fujifilm system for that sole purpose alone. After owning 2 systems, I have to say that I also just like the color science of Nikon cameras, especially the portrait profile. I really like how that looks straight out of camera. Since I also just do some post-process my images, film simulations are for me personally not that important, but again, depending on your preference. Now let's quickly talk about the newly released OM3 from Olympus, which is now just represented by this OG OM1. And when I saw the first videos about the new Olympus OM3 camera, I was initially pretty excited, because I thought, cool, again a new retro design camera, which might be just interesting to look at. And then we have more options on the market. But at second sight, I have to say that I personally would not consider the OM3, especially for the new price, because depending on the region, again, the OM3 is around at launch for $2,000, and that's already much more expensive compared to the used prices of the ZF and the X-T5. Plus, the sensor size is only micro four thirds. Don't get me wrong, I do own myself 2 micro four thirds cameras, which I quite use often lately. And I do appreciate the sensor, what it can do. For $2,000, I personally would lean more into the APC or full frame options of the retro design cameras from Nikon or Fujifilm. Also, regarding the retro design language or design, in my opinion, Olympus only took the OM1 as an inspiration and put all kinds of tech into that OM3, but unfortunately didn't complete that retro design language, because you can see here on the OM1 that you have your shutter speed and ISO dial on this one. Then you have your aperturing, of course, on the lens, as it was on normal in the film days. And if you look at the dials of the OM3, on instead of that shutter speed dial, you only have that modern PASM dial. That's okay. It's just my personal opinion that doesn't complete that retro design language from the past, which Fujifilm and Nikon with the ZF did on their cameras with shutter speed dials. And regarding the lenses, as far as I saw, the lens lineup of Olympus also don't have aperture rings, which again makes me personally think that the OM3 is just from the outside looking like a retro design camera, but if you're actually using it, it would feel more like a modern camera, which is nothing wrong, but I think I would have to use it in person to make a concluded opinion about that. But that's just my first thought regarding the OM3, that for the new price of $2,000, for me personally, it would be too expensive. I would lean more towards the other options. But what's your opinion about all these vintage design cameras and options we nowadays have? Which one would you use or choose for your use cases? Do you like vintage design cameras? Let me know in the comments below and start the discussion and conversation. That's my quick rant on the retro design cameras for 2025. Did I forgot any options which you like to include in this discussion? I personally would still choose the Nikon ZF after owning it for over a year now, but I also understand why people would more gravitate towards the X-T5, because let's face it, this form factor is just cool and amazing. But yeah, Nikon ZF for me. And if you are still here until this point watching, thank you very much for your time. You are the one who deserves the like for that. And if you want to support my small little channel, you can check the affiliate links below in the description, or buy me a coffee, also linked below in the description. And although I would choose the Nikon ZF over all other retro design cameras, the Nikon ZF is not my favorite Nikon camera right now. And if you want to find out which one it is, just click on this video.